Probably the biggest news of the day is that oil has dropped below $100 a barrel as the panicans are beginning to figure out that this war can't go on for very long. Iran's just getting crushed. And a few more of their ships went to the bottom of the sea today. They continue to talk boldly, and they're going to strike everyone and continue their Yosemite Sam strategy. Meanwhile, Lebanon wants to make a separate peace with Israel, and everything they're firing at the UAE is not getting through. We'll check up on that with Lucas Tomlinson of Fox News a little bit later in the program. Ambassador Michael Oren, former ambassador of Israel in the United States, will be joining us. Leland Vittert on how he covers the war for News Nation. I'll be joined by, of course, Senate Intelligence Committee Chairman Tom Cotton. It is being Monday. Ross Greene is the author of a brand new book, The Kids Who Aren't Okay. There are other stories out there besides the war, and I'm going to cover them throughout this, but I will make sure I conclude with Nadav Eyal, and if President Trump says anything at the beginning of his late afternoon press conference, I'll bring that to you, but I expect most of that will come to you on the Salem News Channel from Larry Elder, who is on after my show since the president's not starting until 5:30. It usually starts a little bit late down at Mar-a-Lago. Probably won't catch any of that. I was up late last night with Brian Kilmeade on One Nation with Brian Kilmeade, and I thought, since we talked about the war, I'd play that segment for you right now, cut number 1.
Joining us now with his take, the host of the Hugh Hewitt Show, Hugh Hewitt, and he's a Fox News contributor. Hugh, I wanted to dig up those tapes because I started thinking I was hallucinating. It wasn't always this way.
No, Brian, you're right. It's great monologue, and good to see you this evening. President Trump has broken the Democrats. He has broken their resolve to defend the United States. He has broken their resolve to fund the troops. He has broken their ability to see clearly that we have an enemy in Iran. It's been our enemy since 1979. This isn't lingering Carterism, where President Carter was simply confused about events going on during the Iranian Revolution. It's not Bill Clinton attacking Yugoslavia in 1978. It's not even Barack Obama attacking Libya in 2011. This is after 10/7, the Democrats went anti-Israel. They went all in to be against Israel. And now Democrats are afraid to stand up for Israel, and they're afraid to stand up for the United States, even though we are in a direct conflict with an enemy that has been a declared enemy who has killed thousands of Americans over 47 years. It's astonishing what's happened to the Democrats. They are now defeatist.
Like a guy like Senator Kelly, he's got to be extremely bright. The guy's an astronaut, a fighter pilot, esteemed, great American, and he thinks he just wants to put down the war effort, which has been flat out phenomenal from the military point of view. And there's a myriad of reasons why they need to be confronted now. But I thought Bill Maher was brilliant on Friday night when he said this to Adam Schiff. Watch.
This statement from the administration: the president had the constitutional authority to direct the use of military force because he could reasonably determine that such use of force was in the national interest. That's too vague for you?
Totally vague.
Okay, because that's from Obama about Libya.
Well, Obama made the argument initially that he could go into Syria without an authorization. I and many others pushed back on that argument. Ultimately, he did not go forward with going after Assad, even though Assad was gassing his own people, because he thought he might lose the vote in Congress.
He jogged past Libya, which was an 8-month operation without authorization, and went to Syria. I would argue at the lowest moment in his foreign policy career, when he ignored the red line that he laid down and lost his credibility forever in the region.
It's hard to argue that which is worse, the red line that President Obama erased or President Biden's collapse in Afghanistan. Taken together, they sent a signal around the world that America was weak and that the Democratic Party, when it was in charge, could not be trusted to defend America. That signal is being amplified in the first week of this very successful battle with Iran. As the Admiral pointed out, as you have pointed out, as everybody who talks about the numbers, they've lost 90% of their ability to project power, maybe 85, but it's getting close to 90% of their ability to attack, and their attacks aren't getting through. We are in complete integration with our Israeli ally and with our Gulf allies. Everybody in the region knows that Iran cannot be allowed to rearm, can't have a nuke. We're destroying the remnants of the program that the president obliterated. They had begun to rebuild. It's being destroyed again. The missiles are being destroyed. The drones are not getting through. We have lost 7 Americans, 10 Israeli citizens, somewhere around 20 of the citizens of our Gulf allies, so it's not without terrible, terrible cost. But Iran, the trajectory that they were on, was such a dramatic threat to America. It's astonishing to me to hear Democrats talk this way. And I'll simply say, I'm hoping Angus King, he's an independent from Maine who caucuses with the Democrats, Jack Reed from Rhode Island, some of their serious people step up and say in their caucus and on the floor, hey, we want to win this war. We want to win it very, very quickly. We want the price of oil to come back down, and we want Iran to be put into a box and for them to stop killing their own citizens. 35,000 of their own citizens they killed. The mind meltdown in the Democratic Party that they will ignore the tyranny of Iran against its own people, much less against Israel and against us, against our own soldiers, is baffling. And maybe they will wake up. It's not the Democratic Party I've grown up with.
So here's an example. They're going to have a chance to do something for the country, I think. There might be a need for a military supplemental. Some say as many as $50 billion. They haven't requested it yet. But when they do, they're going to need Democratic votes. Will they get them?
They won't get them on a supplemental. They're too afraid of their left wing. They absolutely won't get them on the supplemental. I am hoping that Leader Thune, Speaker Johnson consider using the reconciliation process so that the money that the military needs to prosecute this war to its successful conclusion quickly comes very quickly through reconciliation. But any Democrat who votes against an appropriation, it will never be forgotten. This is not the party of Franklin Roosevelt, Harry Truman, John F. Kennedy, Lyndon Johnson. It's not even the party of Bill Clinton anymore. And if they refuse to fund this effort against one of the most malign nations in history, really one of the most evil regimes that we have ever seen in the course of modern history, they will be departing from a position, I think, that most Americans will be very uncomfortable with. They can't count on the Democrats to defend the country if they vote against that measure when it comes forward.
Do you think it would be good for the president to give a speech and talk about what the day after looks like, when the war ends, what will look like, and maybe clarify the objectives, because so many people are making a living blurring what he's actually saying?
Yeah, I have sort of come around to his approach, Brian, which is if you say concise 4 to 5 minute things, you engage with the press a lot, you are less subject to distortion. He is at his best engaging with the press, talking to people like you on the phone tonight, even members of the left-wing legacy media. He calls them up, he talks to them. I like the 4-minute video that he released on the night that the operation commenced. I don't think he needs to do the big set piece because events are moving so rapidly. I hope he just stays in constant communication with a lot of people.
He doesn't want to leave anything for the next guy. If he could handle it now, he's going to handle it. I think that's pretty clear. Cuba, I hope you heard that.
Cuba is next.
I know. Yeah. Hewitt, thank you so much.
I love Brian works late. Brian is the hardest working man in broadcast. I mean, he does it every weekend. I show up occasionally on Brian's show, occasionally on Trey's show, but I don't like to work weekends. I've been working for 35 years. And yesterday I wrote a piece for the Daily Wire. Because Ben Dominish took over their new opinion section, and he sent me an email. I said, I know what you told me about you and Nixon and Iran. And in fact, I worked for Nixon in 78 and 79 in the Elba of America, San Clemente, when the Iranian Revolution was happening. Ben said, can I have 900 words? No, that's too hard. So I sent him 1,500. And the Daily Wire has it up today. And it begins when the president, Thanksgiving 1979, Mrs. Nixon was very nice to Ray Price and I, invited us to Thanksgiving dinner with Julie and David Eisenhower, Ray and I, and the president, Mrs. Nixon. And we're standing around in the living room at Casa Pacifica, and the president, I'm a 23-year-old stumblebum from Ohio. I've never seen caviar, much less asked for it. And the president's serving on this silver tray, and he comes around and says, have some caviar. It's from the Shah. There won't be any more of that. And I tried. I didn't really like it. But that begins my piece at the Daily Wire. The important stuff is not that. The important stuff is what Nixon was processing. He knew what a disaster it was when Carter melted and when we allowed the Shah to fall. He wrote about it in The Real War. I was involved in the writing of it, and I quoted extensively in the piece. I posted over at my X account. I encourage you to go and check it out. Relief Factor Studio. That's where I am. Time to take my Relief Factor. It was a busy weekend. I went up to L.A. to see Leonard and Judy. Then I went in L.A. with Toby and Bob Waldorf to the Musique. Then yesterday down to see Phil and Katie Brady and Dana Plenty. It was all over the place with the Fetching Mrs. Hewitt. So that's a lot of driving time, and Relief Factor is meant for people who commute. I take it every day. And I've been taking it for 13 years. The only supplement I've taken for more than 20 years because it works, gets rid of the minor aches and pains. So I drove hundreds of miles this weekend. I'm fine. Back doesn't hurt, legs don't hurt, knees don't hurt because I take Relief Factor every day. The starter pack is $19.95. If you're a commuter or if you've got minor aches and pains from exercise or aging, call 1-800 the number 4 and the word relief. $19.95, less than $1 a day for the 3-week starter pack, or find the starter pack at their website, relieffactor.com, relieffactor.com. Leland Vittert rejoins us. He was last on when his wonderful book, Born Lucky, came out. Continues to sell like hotcakes with such an extraordinary look into the lifetime and childhood, especially, of children who are born somewhere on the spectrum. Leland is, though, on today because he's a war correspondent. He's in the studio now with On Balance every night over at News Nation. But I want to talk to him about covering this war. Leland, how are you?
Well, once a war correspondent, always a war correspondent, Hugh. So sometimes, as you know, the arrows and knives of a Washington newsroom are worse than that actually in war.
I don't know that because I've never had to work in a newsroom in D.C. The newsroom I had was PBS in L.A., and that was pretty bad, but that's okay. Leland, I want to ask you, number one, there's so much available on the web that it is difficult to distinguish between AI-generated disinformation and hard facts. What filters are you putting up to make sure you only learn what's true?
Well, trying my very best to cross-reference everything I hear, number one. Number two, cross-referencing not only sort of what you're hearing and seeing online, but with real people who are either in the region or involved in the government and other places where they are in a position to independently verify so much of this. But you're right that AI has created a fog of war, and you could say call it a fog of journalism, which is far greater than anything we ever had to deal with before.
I agree with that. Now, what I'm trying to do is find facts. When someone like the IDF puts out the number of attacks has decreased by 90%, we've destroyed 80% of their launchers, but this percent of drones are getting through, or the UAE posts their daily defense ministry stats, I rely on that. And when we sink ships in the Iranian Navy, I rely on that. And we always tell people our casualties. But what else do you look for other than the IDF, the CENTCOM feed, the UAE feed? What else are you relying on?
Relying a lot on trying to see what's happening on the ground. And I think the one thing to be watching for right now is whether or not there are protests on the ground in Iran. We have not seen a lot of video of that. That's something I'm watching for. I'm watching the price of oil because I think that is sort of signifying how successful the Iranians are in causing the one pain point they have left. I'm watching for what the Iranian drones have been able to destroy in terms of U.S. military hardware, not only the casualties, but the very high-end U.S. military hardware. I'm also watching for what's not being said sometimes, and often what's not being said, which in this case is a specific goal by the administration of what they view as the end of this war, may be the most important things.
Leland, which war? Tell the audience who may not be familiar with how many years you spent in war zone, where you went, when you went, what you saw.
4 years in the Middle East, so a couple of Gaza wars, the Libyan Revolution, the Egyptian Revolution, covered the Syrian Revolution, some time in the Gulf, a little bit of the uprising in Turkey, and then spent the last month of my overseas tour in Ukraine for the first Russian invasion in 2014.
So that's the perfect setup. In the 10 years that have elapsed, since 12 years since you were in Ukraine, war has changed. You know, I've been in this game since 1989 in broadcast, and I've been studying Iran since 1978 with Richard Nixon. It's completely different. The drones, it's completely different. Do you think the American consuming audience understands how different war has become?
Well, they may not, but they will once they watch On Balance at 9 p.m. tonight on News Nation, or they listen to this interview on the Hugh Hewitt Show, because that's what we're talking about tonight. And it is beyond incompetence from the U.S. military that they did not plan better for the low end military threat, right? The U.S. is just extraordinary at the high end of being able to intercept ballistic missiles and shoot down uh, incoming fighter jets and the like. What they're not good at, and what the past week has proved that they have a very hard time doing, is intercepting massive amounts of Iranian drones coming in swarms. And what is stunning to me, Hugh, and I think what you're getting at, is that this was so predictable because it's exactly what the Russians have been doing to the Ukrainians with Iranian drones. And the U.S. military seemed just not to plan for that. You're showing videos of Tomahawk missiles that cost $2 and $3 million a piece, and the interceptors that go up can be $4 or $5 million a piece. And we're spending those, using those, trying to shoot down $20,000 drones. It is not a good investment.
There are two things that I haven't seen, Leland. Maybe you have. I saw a brief bit of open intel that the Growler, which dispatches from the carriers, although there is an expeditionary squadron of Growlers that can fly from Air Force bases, but they're on carriers. They can bring down drones in dramatic numbers. I don't know how many Growlers we have and how often they're deployed. The second thing is that our P-8s, which are sub-hunters, the Iranian Navy had 5 subs at the beginning, 5 real big subs. One has been sunk, but they got a lot of mini subs. Have you seen any open source stuff on that?
I have not, but I think what you're seeing in terms of a direction, and we'll have a little bit more on this tonight, is the fact that the U.S. Navy is not transiting the Strait of Hormuz and providing tanker escorts that we know of right now tells you, I think, that Central Command does not yet confidently understand what the Iranian capabilities are, or what's survived from an Iranian capability standpoint in the Strait of Hormuz, and in the very close-in coastal waterways around Iran. And that, to me, is, once we start seeing that, that will tell us that the United States at Central Command is much more confident about that. It's no surprise, right, that President Trump, in his opening statement about the Iranian attack, Iranian war, whatever you want to call it, said we've gone after Iran's Navy. And that's because everyone knew that the Strait of Hormuz was the choke point. This was Iran's blackmail. And I think it speaks volumes to why this war has been necessary, that the Iranians have handled themselves and done what they have done to try to economically blackmail the world.
Last question, Leland. I turned to Admiral Mark Montgomery. Of course, Senator Cotton's on a little bit later. People who have access to open source and closed source, and they're careful. Who's your go-to guy? You haven't got Jack Keane, who is Mr. War on Fox. I don't either. Who's your go-to people for military expertise?
So a couple of people who will both be on tonight. One is Kirk Lippold, who was the commander of the USS Cole, but who understands these waters. He's been in the Strait of Hormuz time and time again. I think he has something like 40 crossings right now. So he understands those waters. And to your point, can not only look at the open source intel, but look at what's happening and then tell us why it's happening, to extrapolate out what the reality on the ground is. And then we've also found a great guest, and I know he's available to come on your show, is a guy named John Teichert, who was an F-22 pilot and a commander of the Edwards Air Force Base test squadron that did all of the Air Force testing for aircraft, air defenses, on and on and on. And lastly, he finished up his career as a one-star general as the U.S. military attaché to Iraq. So he understands the region on top of all that. And in terms of air powers, invaluable.
F-22, the apex predator, really, of all military systems. Leland Bittert, good to talk to you. Watch him on the, what time is On Balance on, Leland? 9 o'clock? I think it's 9 o'clock. On Balance with Leland Bittert on News Nation tonight. I had an amazing weekend, which included a lot of the music of Quincy Jones. That was John Androzek, not Quincy Jones. I'll play a little Quincy Jones coming back. But I spent, our friends Toby and Bob Waldorf, been friends for a long, long time. They said, hey, come join us at the Wallace in L.A. on Saturday for a concert at 2:30. And we said, well, we'd love to see Bob and Toby. We've known them for a long, long time. Good friends. But what's going on at 2:30 on a Saturday in L.A.? Well, what's going on was a fabulous musical exploration by a group called Musique, MUSE/IQUE. Which I'd not known about. I hadn't even been to the Wallace before in Beverly Hills. And this remarkable collection of musicians and vocalists did a 90 to 100-minute exploration of the life and times of Q. And the music was fabulous. But what I did not know about Quincy Jones is so much more than I did not know. Including, look, everyone should know that he worked in film in Motown. He came out of Seattle. He worked with everyone in the business from Frank Sinatra to Michael Jackson to Oprah. And he did everything with everyone, Spielberg. Amazing, amazing stories. John Williams, just amazing stories. But I did not know that Thriller remains the best-selling album of all time with 44 million copies. Michael Jackson was born in 1958. And when they played a couple of cuts from Thriller in an album before that Quincy Jones produced with Michael Jackson, the musicians who are in the demo, that means if songs come out between the age of 14 and 20, they're in your demo. And that's the oldie station that you'll be listening to when you grow up, because that's when the hormones kick in and you notice the boys and the boys notice the girls. And bingo, you are hooked on the music of that era. And Thriller came out, and so the musicians just couldn't stop dancing. It was just a fabulous thing. Thank you, Toby and Bob. But I want to tell people about Musique, MUSE/IQUE. They have 6 shows a year. And this year, the 2026 season is all about our 250th year of freedom. And it's really amazing. Their 3rd show is The Sun Rises in Harlem. Their 4th show is Defiantly Joni Mitchell. Those are in June and July and April. They do Back to Oz. October, they do American Sound Takes Flight. They do Looking West. And August, I just never heard of it before. And I want people to know about it because it's fabulous. Okay, back to the war. Here is what do Americans think about the war? Well, let's talk about Iraq and Gulf War vets and Afghan vets about the war. Harry Anton on CNN, cut number 2.
Overall, public and those who are either currently or have served in the military. Take a look at this Fox News poll that came out during the past week. Net approval rating of the current U.S. military action against Iran. Look at that. Overall, Fox News shows a dead even split. But look at those who served in the military. Significantly higher support for the U.S. military action currently going on in Iran at plus 20 points. That should not be so much of a surprise because take a look at how they view Trump's foreign policy overall. Again, look at those who served in the U.S. military versus overall.
You know why it's not a surprise? Because a lot of those veterans, including my son, my son-in-law, my nephew, they were attacked by Iran. Right, so Iran's been attacking American servicemen since 1979, and they have killed thousands and wounded thousands of them. So, of course, vets are going to be in favor of taking them off of the board. So, Ambassador to the United Nations Michael Waltz on Meet the Press on Sunday, cut number 4.
Well, I'll tell you, the military objectives and achievements a week in are truly extraordinary, as the president has effectively laid out. Iran's Air Force destroyed. Iran's air defenses destroyed and almost completely degraded. Its Navy sunk. Over 40 ships sitting at the bottom of the ocean. And importantly, their ability to produce these ballistic missiles and these drones with which they've been terrorizing Israel, their neighbors in the Gulf, providing to Russia and using against Ukraine, is also being severely degraded. So the military, our great Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth, Secretary Rubio, and others are laying out the case in terms of how we are going to protect the American people and eliminate this threat once and for all. Kirsten, I can tell you as a veteran, I can't. It breaks my heart in so many ways that we have had to deal with this threat across the Middle East for 47 years. And I want to be clear, the Iranian regime started this war in 1979 under Jimmy Carter. And thank God for President Trump. He's taking the bold, decisive action that so many of his predecessors have failed to do to end it and to end this threat to the American people and our allies once and for all.
Ambassador Michael Waltz on Meet the Press yesterday, just talking about the album Thriller. It is thrilling, sort of, to live in Israel every day under attack from the north from Hezbollah, under attack from Iran at intermittent times throughout the night. Nothing yet from Hamas. I'm joined by former Israeli ambassador to the United States, Dr. Michael Oren. Well played on CNN, Dr. Oren, when you corrected the anchor. Oh, by the way, we're under attack here. I thought that was well played.
They had a 7-minute item, Hugh, about Lebanon, all the destruction that we are wreaking on Lebanon, without mentioning not one of the 220 missiles that they had fired at Israel up to that point. They fired a lot more today. And it's just, it's rotten journalism. It's basically propaganda. And I wasn't going to let them get away with it. It's enough. And it's extraordinary. I was talking to the American news today. Nobody knows what's going up on North. We're under constant fire from the North.
Now, let's talk Lebanon first. I have seen open source discussions that maybe Hezbollah wants to say no mas, or maybe Lebanon wants to formally agree with Israel to exterminate Hezbollah. What is the situation diplomatically about the northern front?
Well, it's not quite true. What the message was tonight, that the Lebanese government communicated to Israel through the United States that they're interested in having ministerial level peace talks on Cyprus. And that there were actually elements, they indicated there were elements in Hezbollah that said that they were on board with this. They wanted to get a ceasefire. And the response of the Trump administration was terrific, was, hey, listen, you promised to dismantle Hezbollah's arms, to disarm them, and you haven't done it. And you're just going to have now a ceasefire. We're going to go back to the status quo ante. That's a no-go. So you start making concrete steps toward fulfilling your commitment to disarm Hezbollah, and we'll talk about it. And I thought that was an excellent response.
All right, now let's go to the news generally. You know that there's been a sewage spill in the Potomac. They're now calling it the Poo-tomac because it's so bad. That's like my feed. I can't tell what's real and what's not real. I'm looking for hard facts about how the war is going. How do you think the war is going based on hard facts?
You want the hard facts? Hamas and Iran are pretty much the same. In order to win, they have only not to lose. And they don't care how many ships they lose. They don't care how many leaders that get assassinated. They're just, as long as they can come out of the rubble at the end and go like this, then they've won. And so, yeah, we've got this. We are in maybe just the beginning stages of this. That doesn't mean the war is going to go on indefinitely. It just means there's going to be a very intense beginning of the war, and then we'll keep up the pressure on Iran by having a very tight naval blockade. Not a drop of oil gets out of there. And Americans, we understand here. The Americans have the scars of Iraq and Afghanistan and these so-called endless wars. But a much better example would be the Cold War, which took decades. And America kept up the pressure on the Soviet bloc, and eventually that bloc fell. And this may be the case here, because barring a upheaval, a domestic revolt or a type of coup within the Iranian leadership itself or in the army, this could go on for a very long time because they don't care. All they care about is that they don't lose and can come out of the rubble and make the V sign.
Well put. Now, Israel's Navy last night took out 5 Iranians of the Quds force in Beirut, reminding us that not only does Israel have a Navy, so does Iran. Now, we being the United States, have sunk a lot of their Navy, but they had 5 submarines at the start, at least one has been sunk, and a lot of mini subs. Any hard reporting in Israel about the naval threat underwater from Iran?
None whatsoever. Zero. Not even about the reports about what the Israeli Navy has done. They're keeping that under close wrap. Okay. And I imagine there are many types of military activities that are going on that we don't know about and we shouldn't know about.
One of the things I have been making a point to say, you said this could go on a long time. I just don't want people to think it's going to be less than 2 months or 3 months, because it's an air war. It's not a ground war. There is no march to Tehran. There's not going to be a ground incursion. Do you think that is a fairly realistic minimum time set, 2 to 3 months?
It's realistic, and I'm a little bit more optimistic in you that once we eliminate Iran's ability to launch missiles at us, at our neighbors, then Iran is basically that kind of sitting duck, and you can maintain a much lower level of air activity, but keep up the naval blockade, keep the pressure on, and eventually they'll break. And again, the model is not Iraq, it's not Afghanistan. The model is the Cold War.
And now, Ambassador Oren, we are on Khamenei 2.0. We may be on half of Khamenei 2.0, given some of the reports that he's been badly injured. Does Israel have a checklist that they'll just keep going down and the assets in place to find and eliminate all of the Iranian leadership?
Well, it depends on who the leadership is and what their positions are. If Mr. Mushtaba Khomeini were to come up and say, "Okay, I'm willing to, toss in the towel, and I'm going to give up the nuclear dream. I'm going to give up the production of ballistic missiles, and I'm going to stop supporting terror around the world." Okay, he could be the leader of Iran. But if he's going to have the exact same policies as his father and of the founding of the Islamic Republic, Khomeini, then his longevity should be very, very short-lived.
Do you think it's significant? Khomeini, the founder, was against hereditary succession. He thought it was un-Islamic. It's very, very, very verbal about that. Does it matter in the propaganda war that they've basically crowned a king and passed it on to the prince?
Well, it matters internally, domestically, and it has to do with his legitimacy. So tonight we were treated to these pictures of tens of thousands of supporters of the regime going out and chanting Allah Akbar and chanting for swearing fealty to the new supreme leader. Now, the question is what do other Iranians think, and does this chip away further at what little legitimacy this regime still had?
Last question: Israel Advocacy Group, which you founded, has got to be busier than ever. Do people understand the depth of the integration of the U.S. and Israeli military operations?
They do not. And I will tell you on a personal level, on a historical level, the United States and Israel have always had a totally special relationship and the deepest and most multifaceted strategic alliance, which the United States has had with any foreign power in the post-World War II period. That includes the United States and Great Britain. Not much to say about that now. And today, Israel is without question America's only truly dependable military ally in the world, an ally that's going to be there and an ally that's willing to fight. Now, that's extraordinary. And I don't recall anything like that of the United States and Israel cooperating at the level they're cooperating and mounting a joint offensive against a common enemy. It's quite extraordinary.
It is, and if people understood the tactical integration as well, to the extent that it's available, I think anyone who's studying, even reads lightly about war, would be astonished. Dr. Michael Oren has a new piece over at Fox on the fact that we've been at war with Iran for 47 years. Same sort of thing I wrote for the Daily Wire today. So go over to Dr. Michael Oren on X and find it, or you can find it on my feed. I just reposted it as well. Thank you, Ambassador Oren. If you missed my discussion of Quincy Jones, you'll have to listen to the podcast when it comes out later. Coming up next hour, Senate Intel Committee Chairman Tom Cotton joins me, as does Selena Zito, as does Lucas Tomlinson from Dubai. Don't miss any of that. Hour number 3, Dr. Ross Green, author of The Kids Who Aren't Okay, fabulous new book. 50 million kids, K through 12, go to school every day. 10 to 15% of them create 80 to 90% of all the discipline issues. Doesn't have to be that way. Dr. Green explains why. Don't miss that interview. And Nadav Eyal, who you hear on Dan Senor's Call Me Back podcast, joins me as well. A lot ahead. I want to, however, remind you that it is Lent. Now, I did the double dip yesterday, Presbyterian Church in the morning with Fetching Mrs. Hewitt, and then my Catholic Mass, Last Chance Mass, 5 p.m. in the afternoon. Both the pastor and the priest looked at the congregation when they were talking and asked rhetorically, "How's your Lent going?" And that made me think of Food for the Poor. I didn't do the big Food for the Poor push last week because the war just opened up and the audience swelled up and all they wanted was war news. Now they realize, I think people will realize, this is going to be weeks, months long, and we're going to cover other stories besides the war, and I'm going to tell you about Food for the Poor as I do every Lent. There's a banner, a blue banner, at the top of HughHewitt.com. Give the gift of life. That's for Food for the Poor. Your $50. We'll listen to Paul tell you about how $50 go. Paul Jacobs with Food for the Poor.
Well, this is the miracle. $50 will help provide 2 children access to safe water for an entire year. There are children who are walking miles. They are making a life-threatening journey to get water from very unclean water sources. And then there is children as young as 5 years old. And so we aim with that gift, your donation, to provide 2 children access to safe water for an entire year.
You can text a $50 contribution, or 100, or 200, or 1,000, or 5,000 to Food for the Poor by using the number 51555, 51555. The code is Hewitt, Hewitt. Just text Hewitt, Hewitt, to 51555. I prefer the old-fashioned way, calling 855-359-4673. Every $5, every $50, every $500 counts. Food for the Poor has been doing this in the Caribbean and Central America for decades. They're a Christian organization. They're so fabulous. They are so effective. Their overhead is so well managed. Your donation is safe with them, and your Lenten almsgiving will go directly to people who, when you do it to the least of these, you do it to me. Christians will recognize that verse. Or you can go, of course, to HughHewitt.com. And there is a banner that will load at the top. You cannot miss it, even if you're a Steelers fan. By the way, the Browns signed Zion Johnson today. Go Browns. But if you're a Steelers fan, you'll find the blue banner at the top of HughHewitt.com. It says, Give Living Water. And that's the water that comes from Food for the Poor. Thank you in advance for your donation at the top of HughHewitt.com. President Trump, in a phone call with a CBS reporter, said the war is almost over. We are far ahead of the original estimate we made that the war would last 4 to 5 weeks. Not too soon, please, Mr. President. Crush the regime. Secretary of War Pete Hegseth on 60 Minutes last night with Major Garrett, cut number 5.
Lines.
2 more cuts, and then I'll bring you up to speed on what Amit Segal is posting from Israel. Wouldn't want to be an Iranian target right now. Amit Segal, one of the most wired-in reporters in Israel, has posted 2 things in the last hour. Half hour ago, President Trump, quote, I'm considering taking control of the Straits of Hormuz. They better not fire anything new, otherwise it will be the end of that country. And then, really more interesting from an Israeli perspective, but we have an interest in this as well. Their northern front is with Hezbollah, a proxy of Iran that is embedded within the failed state of Lebanon. This is not a proposal from the Lebanese government, but from the most senior figures in Hezbollah, who passed it on to Nabi Berri, the Speaker of the Parliament. The goal of the Hezbollah proposal was to make an initial overture towards negotiations with Israel for a ceasefire. There is a dilemma in Israel. Although Israel is outwardly skeptical, there's an internal debate, and the country faces a fork in the road. On the one hand, there is the option of launching a broad campaign to eliminate the organization, not settle for what we are seeing now, with Hezbollah firing as far as Tel Aviv and targeting the entire north. On the other hand, there may be a strategic achievement within days in the form of severing Iran's ties with Hezbollah. Remember that on November 27, when Israel agreed to a ceasefire, it was considered a strategic achievement to sever Gaza from Lebanon. What is now being discussed would be an even bigger event on a significant scale. This is the arm the Iranians have been building for more than 30 years, so that it would serve on this day of reckoning. And now the day is coming, and Hezbollah is laying down its arms. This will not be a development that can be easily ignored. To those who say, Amit continues, wait a minute, they will still be there for the next time, I would answer, people often use the phrase, the tentacle of the octopus. But it is more like the tail of a lizard. You cut off the head, and the tail keeps wriggling. Whenever you want, you can deliver the death blow, because it is clear to the Lebanese today that Hezbollah is not protecting Lebanon, but protecting Tehran. In any case, there's deliberation in Israel. Pretty remarkable statement from Amit Segal. I do recommend you follow him. Additional sinkings of vessels of the Iranian Navy occurred today as our carriers put their fighters on those targets, and that will continue. I don't think there's much left of the Iranian Navy, but I'm still thinking about what's underwater. I'm also thinking about water generally because of our Food for the Poor campaign. There's war raging in the Middle East, and Yosemite Sam, Ayatollah Khamenei 2.0, or half of him because he's been badly injured, lashing out everywhere. Don't forget that they're suffering of the non-kinetic type every day in places like the Caribbean and Central America. Every Lent, which is a special season for Christians of repentance and seeking forgiveness and doing good works, is a season of giving alms. Many people have done it for many years via my Food for the Poor campaign, which is run every Lent. The banner is at the top of HughHewitt.com. It's blue. We made it blue so that the Steelers fans would think blue and water and go right to it. It says, Give Living Water. If you head over there, $50 takes care of a child for a year, clean water. Wherever Food for the Poor operates, whether in Haiti or the DR, throughout the Caribbean, in Central America, in the highlands of Guatemala, they're everywhere. Our friends at the Christian not-for-profit, they provide safe and living water to the poorest of the poor. They support gospel-centered transformation through trusted local partners, measurable impacts with people on the ground. Here's Paul Jacobs of Food for the Poor.
Well, this is the miracle. $50 will help provide 2 children access to safe water for an entire year. There are children who are walking miles. They are making a life-threatening journey to get water from very unclean water sources. And then there is children as young as 5 years old. And so we aim with that gift, your donation, to provide 2 children access to safe water for an entire year.
Now, you can do this in a number of ways. The banner is the best way. I think it's the most secure. It's actually, they're all secure. But the banner is very easy. Go to HughHewitt.com, wait for it to load at the top. Go there, click, make your donation. 5, 50, 500, 50 million. Maybe, Mrs. Jobs is listening. I don't know. It would be well worth the time. You wouldn't be reinventing the wheel. You'd get no headlines. You'd simply be doing a lot for the least. And whether it's 5 or 50, God knows, thank you. Or you can go to call 855-359-4673. 855-359-4673. Or text my name, Hewitt, Hewitt, to 51555. That's Hewitt, Hewitt, to 51555. Coming up after the break, here on the Salem News Channel, which you should be watching on Pluto TV, on Amazon Prime Video, or you can watch it on Samsung TV, channel 1177 if you're wondering, or on your device, every device. Coming up, Senator Tom Cotton. We're going to talk about Mark Wayne Mullen taking over DHS. When are we going to fly? I got to fly on Thursday and I got to fly on Saturday. The airports are a mess because the Democrats are putting the country at peril because our Department of Homeland Security is shut down. Not surprisingly, some members of the Transportation Safety Department, what do we call it? TPS, Transportation Protection Service, are not showing up for work because they're not getting paid because the Democrats won't pay them. We'll talk about that. We'll also talk about the reconciliation process, whether that can be used to fund the military's needs that were unanticipated as they win this remarkable series of collisions with Iran. 7 Americans are dead. Between 10 and 20 Israelis are dead. 20 to 30 of our Gulf allies are dead. The Iranians are playing for keeps. They're just not very good at finding the targets that would hurt our military, other than the 7 American military dead who we mourn. Joined by United States Senator Tom Cotton. He is a Republican from Arkansas. He won his primary easily last week. He is also the chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee and chair of the House Republican Conference. Senator, thank you for joining us. Before you were a senator, you were a congressman. Before you were a congressman, you were a soldier. You fought in Iraq, you fought in Afghanistan, and you served with the Old Guard at Arlington. So the 7 U.S. Army soldiers who've been killed in this combat have, I'm sure, near and dear to you. What do you assess the war as? How is it going given the casualties we've had and expect?
Well, Hugh, Anna and I join all Arkansans in grieving for those 7 heroes who were killed and wishing our best condolences and sending prayers to their families. But they have not died in vain. This is an absolutely vital and necessary war against a revolutionary terror-supporting country that's been killing Americans for 47 years, to include maiming and killing thousands of other soldiers who served in Iraq or Afghanistan back in the same time I did. So we always grieve the loss of our heroes on the battlefield, but this war was vitally necessary, and so far our brave and skillful troops have been met with smashing success. You saw the briefing that Admiral Cooper gave last week that gave you the best information you can know about the successes so far, which is Iranian rates of fire have collapsed from the first days of the conflict. That means we've been extraordinarily successful in destroying their missiles, their drones, and their launchers, which was one of the very top objectives in this campaign. Obviously, it continues. We'll continue to target those forces, their Navy, their communications, the regime thugs like the Basij militias, the Quds Force, the Revolutionary Guard Corps that spread and foment revolutionary violence and terror and oppress their own people. So there's still more work to be done. But a week and a half in, I don't think it could be going better. for our brave and skillful troops.
Senator Cotton, 10 days in, we also now have a new Supreme Leader, Khamenei 2.0, or at least half of Khamenei 2.0. It is said that he's been seriously wounded in the attacks thus far. That is a break with Khomeini, the founder of the regime's theology. The fanatic said we should not have hereditary succession for Supreme Leader. Think that causes stresses inside of the regime?
Yeah, Hugh, you're right about that. It's always been the official position that the Supreme Leader role should not be hereditary. It be selected by the so-called Assembly of Experts, who are having a tough time assembling right now in peace and quiet, thanks to the United States and Israel. But I can't help but imagine it does cause some internal dissension and rivalry within the ranks of the senior leaders of Iran, who oppose that on ideological grounds or perhaps on personal grounds. And I don't know about you, Hugh, right now. I don't care how radical and fanatical of an Ayatollah I was. I'm not sure I'd want that job title.
No.
While the U.S. and Iran is still owning the skies above Iran.
The Admiral gave an update on the sinkings last week that is now out of date because another one occurred today, or two occurred today. Open source, Senator, do we know anything about their underwater Navy? They had 5 regular submarines, diesels, at least one of which has been sunk, but they had a lot of submersibles and things like that. I know we have P-8s flying out there. What do you think about that? What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, Hugh, they do have sizable naval forces. Now, they're what you and I and most Americans might call more of a Coast Guard. A lot of these ships, to include some of those submersibles you mentioned, are smaller. Some of them are autonomous. They're not designed to be on the blue water seas. They're designed for the Persian Gulf and the Strait of Hormuz. And it's one of our objectives as well to sink their entire Navy. It's not as urgent an objective because they usually can't project power against our bases or against our friends in the Middle East. That's why the missiles and the drones and the launchers were the first objective, because we needed to take those out to protect our troops and to protect our friends in the region. But in the end, I expect to see Iran's Navy at the bottom of the ocean, so they can't continue to threaten shipping through the Strait of Hormuz.
All right, now, Senator, I want to turn to funding the combat. It's been expensive. It's going to continue to be expensive. We had a big plus up in the defense bill, but we need more. And I was asked by Brian Kilmeade last night, what about a supplemental? I don't think you'd get 60 votes, given that the Democrats have turned into part of the appeasement. Could a second reconciliation that focused narrowly on the Department of War actually make it through the House and the Senate?
Always possible, Hugh. I wouldn't necessarily rule out a supplemental bill, although you're right. The Democrats, amazingly, at a time when no one else in the world is supporting Iran, not even their former quasi-allies like Qatar or Oman or Turkey, the one group left that's supporting Iran in this conflict and rooting for their success seems to be the Democratic Party. But there's no question that after this war concludes, and I saw President Trump's statement today that it may conclude sooner rather than later because they're even ahead of their timetables. There's going to need to be some kind of additional defense spending, especially to replace the very expensive, very high-end, long-range standoff munitions that we used in the first 24 to 72 hours. Things like Patriot and THAAD, missile defense interceptors, PRISM missiles, Tomahawk missiles, and such things. We need that not just because of this conflict, but we've always needed a lot more of it because of the conflict in Ukraine and the deter China from going for the jugular in Taiwan.
Let me ask you about Cuba, Senator, since it's been alight with fires and revolt in the last few days. What do you think is our plan for our island's neighbor?
I'm sorry, Hugh, you're breaking up a little bit.
What do you think is the plan for Cuba, which has had revolution in the streets in the last few nights?
What did President Trump say about it last week? Voluntary transfer or
yes,
something along those lines? Peaceful handover? Look, Cuba has never been able to support itself since the Castro Revolution. For around 30 years, they had support of Soviet Russia. Soviet Russia provided them financial and economic support. They provided the shock troops for communist insurgencies in Latin America and Africa. They were on the ropes in the 1990s after the collapse of the Soviet Union. But then Hugo Chavez threw them a lifeline in the late 1990s. And ever since, Venezuela has been propping up the Castro regime. In return, they provided security to the Chavistas in Venezuela, although that security proved not to be very helpful during the Maduro raid when a lot of Cubans were left dead on the objective. I think without that support from Venezuela, Cuban's government and really its entire economy just seizes up in a matter of months. And I think that's what the president's talking about. Like literally, they can't survive without that support from Venezuela. So I would imagine that there are people in Havana right now, imagine thinking of themselves as the Delcy Rodriguez of Cuba, or wondering if they can get one-way tickets booked to join Bashar al-Assad in Moscow.
I agree. Last question. Your colleague, Mark Wayne Mullen. I got to fly on Thursday. I got to fly on Saturday. We need DHS up and running. Does he have the votes? How quickly can he get confirmed?
I assume that's going to be a priority, I think, for the Senate, Hugh. The president said that Secretary No would stay in the job until March 31st. That's just about the time that we'll break to be back home with our people during Easter. So I would imagine the administration is working overtime to get all of Mark Wayne's papers lined up and up to the Homeland Security and Government Affairs Committee, and we'll do everything we can to process his nomination expeditiously.
Senator Tom Cotton, always good to talk to you. Get all the info. I appreciate it very much. Thank you so much. Selena Zito is columnist of The World. She writes for the Washington Post, for the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, for the New York Post, for the Washington Examiner. She probably writes for other things I don't know about. Selena, how are you?
Oh, just living the dream. The sun is out, which is very rare, so I'm enjoying it.
Now, it is Pittsburgh. You can't get your hopes up. Has the president called you recently? He was talking to Brian Kilmeade last night right before the show, so I think he likes to call people right before their shows.
Well, I don't have a show. I talked to him a week ago, but we talked about East Palestine and the $10 million that he got for economic development in the downtown area and infrastructure.
But not the war.
No, not the war.
All right, so just give me you haven't been spun by the president then yet. What do you think of the battle with Iran?
Well, so I have to base it on the interviews I've been doing with people. And, there's overwhelming support. You and I have talked about this before. It's two different worlds that you straddle when you are a reporter. There's the one that you live in and you report from. In particular, if you're coming from places like I do, right? Pennsylvania, Ohio, Michigan, Wisconsin. And then there's the online world, which is very, very different. And people have very, very different motivations outside of their honest feelings about something to how they form their opinion. That's a long way of me saying people are very supportive of this. Let me
play you a little clip of Harry Enton on CNN and get your reaction to it. Cut number 2.
Overall, public and those who are either currently or have served in the military. Take a look at this Fox News poll that came out during the past week. Net approval rating of the current U.S. military action against Iran. Look at that. Overall, Fox News shows a dead even split. But look at those who served in the military. Significantly higher support for the U.S. military action currently going on in Iran at plus 20 points. That should...
Okay, Selena, veterans know who we're fighting. My son, my son-in-law, my nephew, they've all been attacked by Iran when they were in uniform. Well, there's no doubt among the veteran. I mean, there might be a few, there are always a few, but it's over. They know the enemy. And I think that makes a huge difference here.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And, even Paul Skeens, the Cy Young Award winning pitcher for the Pirates, right? I don't know if you've seen him. He's absolutely amazing. I have a really great piece with him today. Oh. But his support for the military and for the country as he's getting ready to pitch tonight in the World Baseball Series, I think just exemplifies how military men and women feel about Iran, because no other country has killed more in this century of our treasure than Iran.
Well said. But I was a little bit surprised because I wasn't aware that Pittsburgh had a professional ball club anymore. Tell me, Selena, I'm sorry. I know you love your Pirates.
He's amazing. He's absolutely amazing. And his love of country, people don't know he was in the Air Force Academy.
I didn't know that. Tell us his name and what. He's a National League player. I don't follow him because he doesn't get to the postseason because he's with the Pirates.
Paul Skeens. He's pitching tonight. Take a look at my story at Zito Salina, just about his love of country, love of military, how proud he is to be playing tonight. He's pitching tonight. The United States has been crushing it in this series. And if people haven't been watching it, I highly recommend that you do. It is such an expression of patriotism and passion for our country among these players. It's really amazing.
Okay, so you've got the one Democrat in Pennsylvania who supports the troops in the war, John Fetterman. What happened to the Democrats that we grew up with, Selena? I was on with Brian Kilmeade last night. I just said, this is not FDR, Truman, Kennedy, LBJ, not even Bill Clinton. They're all against this combat, and they won't fund it.
You know who stuns me the most is Mark Warner. He really has done a complete change, right? He's really become sort of strident. If Republican or Trump, it's not just Trump anymore. If a Republican is attached to it, he is stridently against it. He could be against school crossing guards if Donald Trump said, "Let's all support school crossing guards and give them a raise." He'd be against it.
It's the Democratic Party disease. Mark Warner is a very smart man. I've met him a few times. Very smart guy. But the Virginia Democratic Party's gone way left. And so you have to worry about that if you're an incumbent senator. I don't know if they'll ever vote for a Democratic, for supplemental for the war. I hope you follow that story. ZitoSalina.com to read her story on the World Series and that buck who is playing for it, whatever his name is. Or just follow her at Zito Salina on X, or go to SalinaZito.com for everything that she writes. Good to see you, Selena. Joined now by Fox News' own Lucas Tomlinson. He is in the war. He's in Dubai. Lucas, what is the day like today? Has the UAE continued to come under attack from Iran?
It's been a little quiet in the past 24 hours, Hugh, but that doesn't mean it's been quiet since this war in Iran began. In fact, the UAE has been the main target for Iran. Iran has fired over 1,400 drones at this country, about the size of South Carolina, and has launched over 250 ballistic missiles. The good news, the Emiratis are intercepting all of Iran's projectiles to the extent of over 92% have been shot down, but it has come at a cost, and it came at a cost today. An Emirati helicopter crashed while intercepting a drone, likely an Apache gunship, because two soldiers were named as being killed in the crash. So that is something that Iran promised, that if there would be a war, they would start a regional one. And what's happened here in the Gulf states is every country has come under attack from Iran. But the air defense has been very strong thus far.
Lucas, Iran fired a missile at Turkey today. Erdogan, the president of that country, expressed dismay. But that is an Article 5 issue, isn't it? Doesn't the rest of NATO have to come in now?
It sure is, if Turkey were to invoke Article 5, and of course goes through a bit of a bureaucratic process, Hugh. But you're right, Turkey is a NATO member, and they were attacked, and they certainly can. It's within their right to invoke Article 5. But if you're relying on the British forces, as you've seen, could be waiting for a little while because they only have a few surface combatants ready to deploy. In fact, one of their destroyers, Type 23 destroyers, was only good for air defense. Right now, the Royal Navy, Nelson is rolling over in his grave, Hugh. We only have about 10 surface combatants that they can muster. And all of their destroyers and frigates are only for air defense, which would come in handy, of course, in this war, but cannot fire long-range cruise missiles. You see Prime Minister Keir Starmer there. We heard President Trump say that he's no Churchill. But the French are deploying their aircraft carrier to the Eastern Mediterranean, Hugh, which will be strategic because the Ford aircraft carrier strike group has been moved over the weekend from the Eastern Mediterranean, transited the Suez Canal, is now in the Red Sea in case the Houthis would get involved. That brings two aircraft carrier strike groups to this part of the world, to the Arabian Peninsula.
So, Lucas, what do the people in Dubai tell you about this war? Are they glad they're finally coming to blows, or are they still too worried about the fact that the Islamic Republic has gone Yosemite Sam on everyone?
They're not happy things have come to blows, Hugh, but officials I've spoken to says this is an attack on Dubai's way of life, the UAE's way of life. This is a very open society here. It's one of the wealthiest cities in the world. In fact, right behind me, you can see the Burj Khalifa. That's the tallest building in the world, 163 explorers. Most of the people here, we've seen that Dubai Mall is behind me as well, are carrying on. But this is also a hub of tourism. And right now, the hotels are taking a beating, if not physically, from a couple of those drones really in occupancy, Hugh. Some of the hotels have gone from about 60% occupancy down to 30%. Some hotels we've heard about have gone down to 1%. And these are hotels that are normally maxed out, 98, 99%. So the people we've talked to on the street, if you were to walk along, you wouldn't always think you're in war right now or in a conflict in the crosshairs of Iran. Again, I mentioned those stats. Once again, Iran has fired over 1,400 drones at this country, over 250 ballistic missiles. Most of them have been intercepted. I heard some of those intercepts this morning. But for the government, they also think there's an attack on their way of life. It's also proximity, Hugh. At the closest point, the UAE is only 45 miles from Iran. And as you've seen with the thousands of drones that have been launched, UAE is a big target. And of course, a signer of the Abraham Accords from President Trump's first term. The Iranians say they're attacking any country where there are American bases. Of course, you have Al Dhafra Air Base for years. That's where we kept our fast movers, our fighter jets, but no strikes against Iran have been launched from the UAE. Of course, all that was moved, and we are seeing some traffic moving in the region. A lot of U.S. Air Force tankers are leaving Saudi Arabia after those oil fields came under attack. You can't talk about the Gulf states right now, not talk about the price of oil, which at one point went over $100 a barrel. That was a 50-60% rise over pre-war prices. The the Strait of Hormuz has effectively been closed. The Iranians are not mining it, but they have threatened any vessel to go through. We heard from the Energy Secretary, Chris Wright, who said he would like to see the U.S. Navy begin escort missions. That's going to be very dangerous, as you can see right there on the map, Hugh. At its closest point, you're only a few miles from Iranian shores. So if any kind of Iranian anti-ship cruise missile or some of those drones, you wouldn't have very long to react. So very dangerous undertaking.
So, Lucas, before the war began, I was told by Iranian Navy experts that they had 5 submarines. I know they've lost 1. They also have a lot of mini-sub. Have you talked to anyone about the threat to our Navy from these underwater vehicles and underwater drones from Iran?
It's something they're looking for, Hugh. In fact, remember when you have the Lincoln Strike Group, but we don't talk about it as much as there's always a fast attack submarine in the strike group. And, of course, Ford will be bringing one as well. So it is a threat they're looking at. However, we have heard from the Pentagon, from the Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth, there that over 40 ships have been taken out. And it seems that that's a very strategic move to try to free up the Strait of Hormuz. Now, one thing to consider also, Hugh, China gets 40% of our oil from tankers that pass through the Strait of Hormuz. So you have to think, while the strait is closed right now, at some point, China will want that reopened and get some of the oil, in fact, to many countries in Asia, in fact, throughout the world.
So, Lucas, last question. When you leave Dubai, are you going to go to Cuba or to Israel or to where are you going to go next? Because there's like a war everywhere.
Right. I'd go where water, Hugh. Cuba would be fascinating right now. It certainly seems like a lot is happening in 2026. It's very busy, very noisy.
Lucas, thank you for joining me. Everyone follow him at Lucas Fox News on X, Lucas Fox News on X. Thank you, Lucas Tomlinson. Coming up next hour, I'm going to be joined by Dr. Ross Green, the author of this book, The Kids Who Aren't Okay. I want to make sure you know about the kids who aren't okay. I also want to make sure you know about Consumer Cellular. I want you to call Consumer Cellular at 1-800-411-4454, 1-800-411-4454, 1-800-411-4454. Why? Because you will save money. You can also go to consumercellular.com/you if you would like. Have you wanted to save some money in your life? Switch to Consumer Cellular. Don't fall for the free phone on us. That's a phony offer from Big Wireless. Use my promo code HUGH, consumercellular.com/you. My 50-plus listeners will get 2 unlimited lines for just $60. That's $30 per line, unlimited data. But use my code when you call. Your second month will be free in addition to that offer for 50 years and older. Anyone who makes the switch to Consumer Cellular takes about 20 minutes. Customer services here in the United States. Do not forget the code HUGH, 1-800-411-4454, 1-800-411-4454, consumercellular.com/you. Secretary Rubio gave a presser on Iran. Let's get a cut of that, cut number 3, please.
The goals of this mission are clear, and it's important to continue to remind the American people of why it is that the greatest military in the history of the world is engaged in this operation. It is to destroy the ability of this regime to launch missiles, both by destroying their missiles and their launchers, destroy the factories that make these missiles, and destroy their Navy. I think we are all seeing right now the threat that this clerical regime poses to the region and to the world. They are trying to hold the world hostage. They are attacking their neighbors. They are attacking neighboring countries, their energy infrastructure, their civilian population. They're attacking embassies. This is a terrorist government. This is a terroristic regime. And we are seeing them conduct terrorism using nation-state elements, using weapons like missiles and one-way attack drones. And the objective of this
using,
mission
by
is
the way,
to
cluster munitions against Israel now. I'll talk with Nadav all about that next hour. Also coming up, Dr. Ross Green, the author of the brand new book, The Kids Who Aren't Okay. Don't go anywhere, because while the war runs, we've got 50 million American kids going to schools, and 10 to 15% of them have real discipline problems. We want to talk about that with Dr. Green, an expert on that. I want to remind you about Food for the Poor, 855-359-4673, 855-359-4673. I said it last hour, I'll say it again. Both priest and pastor this weekend asked their congregations, of which I was a member, how's your Lent going? And I thought about everyone there, about my own Lent, and I thought about yours. If you haven't done anything about Lent and you care about kids, make a donation. Almsgiving is key to Food for the Poor. There is a banner at the top of HughHewitt.com that you cannot miss. It's blue. It says, Give Living Water. And that will take you right to Food for the Poor. For decades and decades and decades, they've been taking care of kids throughout the Caribbean, throughout Central America. Your gift really matters. Also want to remind you, I'm in the Relief Factor studio. Relief Factor, I took it in hour number 1. I remind you now in hour number 2. It works so well for me. It's worked in Cal. I'm taking it back with me to the Beltway on Thursday night. Actually, I'm going via Colorado on Friday, so it's going to take me a couple of days to make it all the way back to the Beltway. But I want to recommend it to you because it works. All right, call 1-800, the number 4, and the word relief. Get rid of the minor aches and pains that come with aging and exercise. Maybe you're finally able to get out in what has been the frozen East Coast. Maybe you went out and did too much in what was the Santa Ana really hot California yesterday afternoon. Got up to 91 degrees. I was way down in Orange County at Dana Point Harbor with Katie and Phil. And then the day before, I was with Toby and Bob Waldorf in L.A., and I was with Len and Judy. I was all over the place. A lot of drive time. That's not good. On backs, on knees, on ankles. A lot of stop and go on the 405. That's what we say in California. We call them by that. But Relief Factor kicked in. I'm fine. Try it for yourself. 1-800, the number 4, and the word relief. 1-800-4-RELIEF, or get the starter pack, $19.95, less than $1 a day at relieffactor.com, relieffactor.com. The president is giving a press conference at the bottom of the hour, and of course we'll bring you news as it occurs, and certainly Larry Elder will have everything for you on the Salem News Channel coming out. I am, however, going to interrupt my war coverage to bring to you a very special guest, Dr. Ross Green. He is one of the leading educators in America. He's the author of the brand new book, The Kids Who Aren't Okay. The Kids Who Aren't Okay came out last week, just as the war broke out, so it did not get the attention it deserved. But I want to make sure that the parents and teachers of America's 50 million K through 12 kids know about the kids who aren't okay. So Dr. Ross Green agreed to join me today. Dr. Green, how are you and where are you?
I'm in Freeport, Maine, a territory you know well, and probably a little colder than you are.
LL Bean still open, I'm sure. Dr. Green, I want to ask you, would you tell people at the beginning of this, your long intervention in American education, especially in the restraint industrial system, as a way of trying to set up why you wrote The Kids Who Aren't Okay?
I wrote The Kids Who Aren't Okay because we are still manhandling a lot of kids who aren't okay. It's called the restraint industry. We keep teaching our educators what to do when it's already too late. And there are a lot of kids who aren't doing very well right now, and we have to open our eyes to that.
In my grandkids' school district, a child died from restraint in December. And of course, they're facing an enormous lawsuit. How often does that happen in America?
Restraint happens more often than we think. It's about 70 to 100,000 times a year, depending on whose statistics you believe. Death, which is the most extreme outcome, we average about 2 or 3 deaths per year based on the most recent research that I'm aware of.
All right. Now, Doctor, you wrote this book, and I say it often because Frank Luntz taught me unless you say the title of a book 7 times, people won't remember the kids who aren't okay. So I will say the kids who aren't okay at least 7 times in every segment. I'm a bit overwhelmed by it. When I got to page 174, evidence-based treatment, I was sitting there thinking to myself, my God, how do we solve these problems? Do you run into that a lot? Because it's overwhelming.
It's thick, I'll say that. Schools definitely implement a lot of programs that are not evidence-based. The model contained in The Kids Who Aren't Okay is evidence-based. I spent a lot of my career doing research on the model. It works, but we do have to sort of plow through all of these structures that are in place, all of these programs that we already do. Once we can get comfortable enough to take a look at our practices and whether they're actually working, it's not that hard to start doing the right thing.
I'm going to talk about the right thing in a moment, but I think the summary quote that I want to take away is on page 75 when you dip into your Shakespeare knowledge and quote the bard saying, better 3 hours too soon than a minute too late. And that is a summary of the whole book. Intervene early. Figure out what's going on with a kid who acts up and has troubles facing the problems that they're dealing with. They can't solve problems. Better to intervene early. Is that a fair summary, Doctor?
It is certainly my favorite point of the book, and that is that so much of what we're teaching educators to do is about crisis management. It's not that hard to start being crisis prevention oriented. We can be early instead of late, but there's a lot of training and a lot of structures in schools that point us toward being late, to the detriment of both the kids who aren't okay and the people who are trying to help them out in schools.
Now, I feel for teachers after reading this book because there's a bell curve in every school system. They're going to have children who don't problem solve very well and who act out in different ways. And the illustrations you provide throughout the book are jarring, really, really jarring. I don't know how teachers do it. When did this begin to be noticed by you as a recurring pattern of modern American education, as well as the wrong solutions to it?
Well, I started working with behaviorally challenging kids in graduate school. Started working with them in schools as a natural progression. If you're working with kids with behavioral challenges, you're working with them in schools, not just with them in families. And that's when it became apparent to me that it was the same kids, 10 or 15 in every school, depending on the size of the school, who are accounting for 70 to 80% of the discipline referrals in that school and 70 to 80% of the punitive exclusionary disciplinary practices that were being administered in that school. And I noticed that we just kept doing this stuff over and over again, even though it clearly wasn't working. And that is still true today. We have a lot of reliance on behavior modification, but, and this is a key to the book, as you know, focusing on behavior is not where the action's at. I get why we're focused on behavior. It's the part that is most disruptive to the classroom, most dangerous. But behind every concerning behavior is a problem that's causing it. Those problems can be identified proactively. They can be solved proactively. If we stay focused on behavior, we're going to be late every single time.
Now, on page 61, you use that term, 10 to 15% of children in school account for 70 to 80% of the discipline referrals. So that does, it telegraphs to me that the AUSP ought to be developed very quickly for the 10 to 15%. That's the term of art that I want people to take away, the AUSP. Would you tell people what it is and as well what the CPS is? Those are the two most common acronyms in the book, and so let's lay it out for them.
ASUP is the assessment of skills and unsolved problems. It helps us move in 30 to 45 minutes from focusing on a kid's concerning behavior, which is just their frustration response. I use those terms interchangeably, to the problems that are causing those behaviors that often have never even been identified, let alone solved. Every year, those problems, I call them unsolved problems, just get punted from one teacher to the next, year after year. After a while, we have a student who has this massive pile of unsolved problems. We've been punishing them like there's no tomorrow. We've been giving them stickers and rewarding them in other ways. Their concerning behavior is continuing because the problems that are causing those behaviors are still unsolved. The assessment of skills and unsolved problem, what I call ASIP, helps us fix that. I do not have a proprietary interest in it. It's free on the website of the nonprofit I founded, Lives in the Balance. CPS stands for Collaborative and Proactive Solutions. Once you identify those problems proactively, you can solve them proactively, but not only proactively, collaboratively, meaning
Now, go ahead.
Go ahead, sorry.
Well, I was going to say livesinthebalance.org. I want people to make sure they know the website as well as the title of the book, livesinthebalance.org. But go ahead. Proactively means?
Proactively means don't wait till the heat of the moment to try to solve this highly predictable, unsolved problem. This is not the first time Timmy has had difficulty completing the double-digit division problems on the worksheet in math. It's the 97th time. Why are we stuck in the heat of the moment yet again, dealing with Timmy's frustration response and sending Timmy to the school disciplinarian so that someone can give consequences for Timmy's frustration response? We'd be saving a ton of time if we were identifying those problems proactively and solving them proactively. But the other key word is collaboratively. Timmy has to be an integral, indispensable part of the problem-solving process. Otherwise, us adults who tend to divine what's getting in Timmy's way and tend to divine solutions will keep doing that. And somebody very important is then going to be out of the loop, Timmy.
What I like that you just used the word punt, Dr. Green, because in my notes, you never use it in the book. You see, it's method C. Method A for dealing with unsolved problems, A, B, and C. Method C is to punt. By the way, it's okay to punt on some problems. You just can't punt on them all. Is that a fair summary as well?
You're punting temporarily. I call it putting the problem on hold. When I say punting, I mean kicking the can down the road. But these kids who have a lot of unsolved problems, you're not going to be able to solve them all at once they're identified. So you're going to have to put some of them on hold for a while until you can get to them, or until you feel like the kid is actually able to meet the expectation. We've been causing a lot of concerning behavior in our schools by putting expectations on kids we already know they can't meet. Who should you ask about that? Their teachers.
I'll be right back with Dr. Ross Green, author of the brand new book, The Kids Who Aren't Okay. And if you're the parent, teacher, grandparent, friend of one of the kids who aren't okay, that's 10 to 15%, you want to get this book and you want to go and find livesinthebalance.org. Dr. Ross Green, and we're talking about the 10 to 15% of America's 50 million, roughly, K through 12 students who have unsolved problems and therefore become discipline issues and sometimes lead to crisis in the classroom. Everybody loses. It doesn't have to be that way. But the complex, this military-industrial complex of education has been spitting out the same solution for decades, and it's not working. Dr. Green, over on page 55, you have a closer look. Where does the National Education Association stand on restraint and seclusion, which is the typical approach? And there follows 4 of the densest pages of gobbledygook because the NEA doesn't really want to tell people what to do. I'm very glad you approached it that way because I wanted to see, they really just don't want to say anything, do they?
I think that it's been hard for them to take a strong stand. And That might be, in fact, I suspect this is the case, because they are hearing from their constituents that they still need these obsolete practices. Restraining meaning pinning a kid to the ground, usually by 3 to 4 adults. Seclusion meaning throwing the kid into a locked or blocked closet-sized seclusion room. There's a lot of educators who still believe that those practices are necessary and point to how difficult some of their students are as evidence of that. The students are still difficult because of the other obsolete practices that we continue to apply to them. If they don't do better, you're going to get them into a frustration response. You are going to do what seems like a necessary practice, pin them to the ground, throw them into a closet-sized room. When educators implement the CPS model, those practices pretty much disappear because they're not necessary anymore.
Now, Dr. Green, I want to stress this. When people do the AUSP, the assessment...
ASUP.
I'm terrible. ASUP. Yeah. Assessment, AUSP.
Of skills and unsolved problems. There you go.
Assessment of unsolved problems. When they do the AUSP, they are going to get a long list. And you encourage them, don't hesitate to split the problem into its composite parts. That, by the way, is an engineering solution. Don't try and solve everything in one long assessment of but take the time to list the component parts. That's hard for people because when they write something down, they know they're going to have to confront it. Can you get that message through? Break it down, break it. It's like diagramming a sentence. Diagram the problems.
So just as a concrete example, and maybe this goes back to engineering, I'm not sure. We're not going to try to talk with the kid about the unsolved problem of difficulty doing math. It's too broad, right? And in this model, there's 3 steps. The first step is that we're gathering information from the kid, who's our number one source of information on what's making it hard for them to meet a particular expectation. People are often skeptical about that part. They often ask me, what makes you think the kid knows? And my answer is 35 years of asking. But if we ask the kid, what's making it hard for you to do the math, you're going to get, I don't know, because it's too broad. We've got to get more specific. We've got to get more micro. What's making it hard for you to complete the double-digit division problems on the worksheet in math? I'm always telling caregivers, be prepared for surprises when you ask, because you are likely to learn that what you thought was getting in the kid's way is not what's getting in the kid's way. This is how we partner with kids on solving problems.
You also recommend very early in the school year, if not before it begins, triage. And by that, you do not mean tracking or tiering. You do not mean segregation. What do you mean by triage?
Knowing what's walking in the door before it walks in the door. We should have much better communication from one year to the next. Every educator would agree with that. But if all we're communicating about from one year to the next is the kid's frustration response, their behavior, then next year's teacher has absolutely no idea what expectations this kid is having difficulty meeting, how some of those problems got solved the year before. They are pretty much going in with blinders on. That's not continuity of care. That's not good care. And schools are providing care for a lot of our kids who aren't doing very well. The care that schools provide could be better than it is if we could just get out of our own way. You mentioned tiers. Tiers refers to this organizational method called multi-tiered systems of support, which many people love, but I find neutral. I find that we end up talking more about tiers, which is what level of support this kid is going to need, than we do about kids, and that's bass-ackwards.
I compliment your use of the need to judge children, assess children based on their level of acuity, because that's a very accordion term. You're trying throughout this book to dispense with the traditional stuff. And by the way, Dr. Green does not dismiss the problems of cell phones. He doesn't dismiss the problem of porn. He doesn't dismiss bullying. He doesn't dismiss anything. He just puts them all into the stew that is causing these unsolved problems. And the unsolved problems he divides into lucky ones. Okay, that's a funny word to term, but crying, withdrawing, sulking, whining, things that elicit sympathy, and unlucky ones, screaming, hitting, spitting, destroying, that get punitive things going. And it's neither lucky nor unlucky. You're just trying not to exclude any unsolved problem. Am I right about that?
That is correct. Every kid, and this is why this model is good even for the kids who aren't exhibiting concerning behavior. Because as you noticed, I'm sure, my definition of good teaching is meeting every kid where they're at. That's for kids whose frustration responses are more mild. That's for kids whose frustration responses are bigger. A frustration, no matter what the frustration response, it's still communicating the exact same thing. There's an expectation the student is having difficulty reliably meeting. Once we get to the level of what are the expectations a student is having difficulty meeting, they can be identified proactively, they can be solved proactively. We can get out of the heat of the moment where I promise you nothing productive is going on. That's the biggest change we need to make. Moving from our focus on behavior, where we've been forever, to our focus on the problems that are causing them. That is massive.
Now, Dr. Green, as I was reading The Kids Who Aren't Okay, it occurred to me you are, in fact, teaching, especially the teachers. When I got about halfway through the book, page 95, the start of chapter 6, putting the horse back in front of the cart, you review everything on page 95 and the top of page 96 that you've written thus far. Because, and actually it goes all the way to page 97, repetition is the essence of learning, right? So you're teaching the teachers to do this again and again. Is it taking hold?
You know, in the schools that are aware of this model, it is taking hold in a big way. Lives in the Balance has never been busier because, quite frankly, there's a lot of leaders in education who know that what we're doing right now isn't working very well, especially for our kids who are struggling the most.
I'm coming back for one more segment with Dr. Green. The book is The Kids Who Aren't Okay. It's at Amazon. It's at Barnes & Noble. It's at Lives in the Balance as well. But all you want to do is go to my X feed, and you'll find a link to The Kids Who Aren't Okay. Dr. Green and I have met a few times in my journeying through Maine. I mentioned LL Bean at the top. Dr. Green is very well known for his book Lost at School, very well known for The Explosive Child, very well known for everything in the world of education. If a superintendent or a classroom teacher or the head of the union or a group of concerned parents wanted to bring this to the attention of their district and get it to actually be absorbed, how do you recommend they go about that, Dr. Green?
Go to the Lives in the Balance website, lives, L-I-V-E-S, in the balance.org. Tell us what you need through the contact form. We are ready to work together with any school system, any individual who's looking to change things for the better, especially for the kids who are struggling the most.
Now, for the school districts that decide to go soon, by the way, everyone, I know that President Trump is starting his press conference. I'm sure Larry Elder will have all of it, but it takes a while for him to warm up. For the school districts that want to embrace this, I would guess this summer they could have everybody read it and get the teachers to commit to doing the work early, the AUSPs early, so that they did not enter the school year. Is that the best way to sort of roll out system-wide a change from restraint and seclusion?
A book study is a very good place to start. I don't want people waiting till summer. That's another 3 months of kids and educators suffering through current practices. Start right away. You can get this book read in 1 to 2 weeks. You can start planning. Easy. Exactly. Yeah. You can start planning. This is an easy read. I like to think I write that way. I also like to think it's a very practical book, despite some of the idealism in the book. This is not that hard of a change to make. With commitment, with intentionality, this can be done. If you want to wait till summer, that's great. I just don't want to see people suffer any longer than they have to.
Now, if you get to the, again, let's say 10 to 20%, I'll even give it, let's say 20% have unsolved problems. If you can reduce the number of unsolved problems in half of those children to a manageable level, the productivity of the entire classroom will increase probably by 50%. I can't imagine some of these things in the Catholic schools of my youth. It didn't happen probably because they were restraint models that people didn't even know about. But nowadays, I hear about it a lot, and we don't want that to happen. What a resource suck.
This is the fascinating part. One of the biggest impediments when people first hear about this model is they feel they don't have time to do it. They are spending mammoth amounts of time on behavior. They would be spending a fraction of the time solving the problems that are causing that behavior. Yes, intentionality and commitment do take time, but the schools that implement this model are saving a boatload of time because they are not running around like chickens with their heads cut off anymore, dealing with behavior.
Crisis from crisis. Again, the book is The Kids Who Aren't Okay. The Kids Who Aren't Okay. Dr. Green is Greene, and you can find it, Ross Green, on Amazon. So, Dr. Green, big picture time. Are you an optimist about American education getting this fixed?
I am. I think there are some outstanding educators out there. I think the very vast majority of educators want the best for their kids and love seeing them thrive. Sometimes it is their training getting in the way. Sometimes it is the system getting in the way. These things can be changed. And by golly, I'm going to get as much of that change done in my lifetime as I possibly can, right here from Freeport, Maine.
Do you know why I'm an optimist? It's because, I don't know if they're in Freeport, Maine or Portland, but there are trial lawyers all over the United States who are going to figure out that it is not best practices to restrain a child. Of course, that will happen in wrongful death case. But in any case, they're going to start suing school districts if they're not using your approach. That's why I'm an optimist. Trial lawyers know there's a duty owed to these children, the 10 to 20%. And if the duty is being breached with damage resulting, it's a mass tort. Has anyone told you that before?
Oh, it's already happening. And I am an occasional participant in those lawsuits. I don't take any money for it because I don't want to feel like I'm a hired gun. I just want to make sure that we're treating kids the right way, making sure kids and educators aren't getting hurt, and make sure that schools that are still using these obsolete practices are held to account.
I hope we are helping them do that. Once again, the book is The Kids Who Aren't Okay. It just came out last week, just when the war got started, so you may not have seen the regular book tour, the CBS Morning News or anything like that, but you should. The Kids Who Aren't Okay needs to be in every teacher's desk and every superintendent's desk and every parent with a child who is being assessed as a difficult child. Go and get The Kids Who Aren't Okay by Dr. Ross Green. Dr. Green, good to talk to you. Joined now by Nadav Ayal. Nadav, where do we find you today?
Well, I'm right now in New Jersey, going to teach my class tomorrow morning, not far from here in New York.
You are at the Columbia School of International and Public Affairs. What are you going to tell your students about this war?
I'm going to tell them that this is a historic moment in the history of the Middle East. It's a watershed moment. It's the first time that Iran has been in a direct confrontation with the United States and Israel since its inception. The Islamic Republic has spoken, has prophesied about a judgment day in which there would be a confrontation between itself and the West. And that day has come, and it is very much related to the actions of the Islamic Republic in those recent decades and the way that it has based its national narrative, its creed, on the ideas of death to America and death to Israel. And I'm also going to discuss with students who want to discuss the complexity of this problem. Will there be a change within the regime? Will there be a regime change, the sort of democratic revolution that the West would want to see? These matters are really very complex and nuanced. And I think this is how we should approach them.
Nadav, I have a piece in the Daily Wire today about watching the original Iranian Revolution in the fall of 78 and January of 79 with former President Nixon and Ray Price and San Clemente. I'd just gotten out of college, the same age of your students you'll be talking to today. And Khomeini came down the steps on February 1 after the Shah had left 10 days earlier, 12 days earlier. And no one in the West had any idea what Khomeini was about. They thought it was like a green-red revolution and everything would be flowers. His theology is so radical. Two questions. Do your students know what his theological worldview is and what we think Khomeini 2.0's worldview is? And do they know that Khomeini 2.0, hereditary succession, is completely contradictory to what Khomeini himself preached?
Yeah, these are excellent questions, and I'm not sure. It really depends on what kind of classes they're taking you. But I think that it was in Israel back in 1979, 1980, and I've seen the articles to prove this. I can send you one just after the show. People were saying this is going to be a disaster. Khomeini is a hardliner, an extremist. He's going to take this country, the entire country. He's going to seize control. And that coalition that you spoke about, the red and green coalition, is just going to become green. It's just going to become Islamic. And what we're seeing now that you just mentioned, the hereditary nature of the regime by electing Mujtaba Khamenei as the leader, the son of Ali Khamenei, this is maybe the final betrayal of the Islamic Republic with the idea that it tried to replace the hereditary rule, the idea of monarchy that has ruled Iran for thousands of years. They came and said, no more. We are a republic. This is how they describe themselves. And yet the Council of Experts elected the day before yesterday the son of the former leader to lead the country. And that tells you a lot about what has happened to the Islamic Republic and the difference between the promise of the Islamic Republic, which was we are going to be a free country and an Islamist country. And that promise almost immediately evaporated towards authoritarianism.
You know, Nadav, I listened with you and Amit and Dan Senor, and you seem to be the moderate guy in Israel, so I'm going to ask you that. I wanted the audience to know this. Republicans are fully supportive of this war, almost 90%. Democrats, almost 95% against it. Independents, sort of 3/4 against it. It doesn't matter right now to me. You got to see how it ends. What's the feeling in Israel about this war and how it has to end?
The feeling in Israel, and that's almost a consensus in Israel, more than 80%, is that it needs to end with a resounding defeat of the Islamic Republic, a sort of a change within the regime or a change of the regime. President Trump, I think, said it best. It's not about trying to install someone else specifically there. It's about the Islamic Republic answering some basic conditions, for instance, not supporting terror across the region. This is how Israelis feel about this. And if you look at Israeli opposition, the chairman of the opposition is the one who's now recommending the government to bomb Harg Island, where the entire oil installations and gas installations of the Islamic Republic are located. This is Yair Lapid, who is saying that a sworn political rival of Prime Minister Netanyahu. So this gives you an idea, the extent of unity in Israel in reference to the war. Having said that, I don't want to sugarcoat this. This is a difficult war for Israelis. Hezbollah has joined the war. People are running for the shelters sometimes every few minutes. And they are traumatized because of 3 years of war that began with a mass massacre on our southern border on October 7th. So they want this over. And as we can see on the screen, and we just saw, there are also damages. And this is significant. And because of that, people are saying we're willing to suffer now if this means that Iran will be taken off as a threat for the next 2 decades. But we definitely want this to end with something that is meaningful. Whether or not this could be achieved, the jury is still out about that.
Now, I listened to 4 Israelis, you, Amit, Dr. Oren, and Haviv. And you all have very different nuanced takes on questions, but this one I want to ask all of you. Hezbollah appears to be offering a separate peace. They're getting the crap kicked out of them, and they may be breaking with Lebanon, and they may be breaking with Iran. Would you accept a separate peace as a good idea with Hezbollah right now?
With Hezbollah itself, of course not. But with the state of Lebanon, that could be a very good idea if the state of Lebanon can actually disarm Hezbollah. The idea in Lebanon, the consensus in Lebanon, the UN Security Council decisions, is that after the IDF withdrew from Lebanon in the year 2000, there is no reason for Hezbollah to exist as an armed militia. It's not only an armed militia, it's the most heavily funded and founded military group, terror group in the entire world. And what the Lebanese are now saying, that I think you're referring to, is let's negotiate directly with Israel. First time in history. Let's even maybe sort of have an agreement there. I think that's an excellent idea if we can get that done.
Nadav, always good to talk to you. Continue, please. Doing more. Insider over at Dan Senor's place. Call me back. Get the Inside Edition so you don't miss a minute of Nadav or me. Thank you, Nadav. The breakdown of President Trump's presser is going to have to wait for Larry Elder, who's following on the Salem News Channel, which you can watch now on Pluto TV, and that's at channel... well, I don't know where it is on Pluto, but it's somewhere. On Samsung TV Plus 1177. We're also on Amazon Prime in the news category. So if you want to find out what's happening with Larry Salem News Channel, go there. I do want to close the show, though, by reminding people that Food for the Poor, my annual Lenten appeal, is underway. As war wages itself across the world, not just in the Middle East, but in Ukraine and other parts around the world, there are children suffering for non-war related reasons. And the kids who are getting taken care of in the Caribbean, the kids who are getting taken care of in Central America, are often taken care of by the Christian not-for-profit Food for the Poor. They do things that have a measurable impact, food and clean water. Here's Paul Jacobs of Food for the Poor.
Well, this is the miracle. $50 will help provide 2 children access to safe water for an entire year. There are children who are walking miles. They are making a life-threatening journey to get water from very unclean water sources. And then there is children as young as 5 years old. And so we aim with that gift, your donation, to provide 2 children access to safe water for an entire year.
Now, yesterday, I did my Presbyterian Catholic thing. With the Fetching Mrs. Hewitt at the Presbyterian Church in the morning, and then the Last Chance Mass at 5 p.m. Both of them, pastor and priest, asked, how's your Lent going? And I wondered, you look around at the hundreds of people in both churches and you think, wonder how their Lent's going. Are they doing anything? Maybe your Lent's not going so great and you've done nothing. Now's the time to change that. Call Food for the Poor at 855-359-4673. 855-359-4673. Maybe it's 50, maybe it's 500, maybe it's 5,000. They'll take any donation over the phone. It's secure. If you want to use the website, there's a banner at the top of my website, hughhewitt.com. You cannot miss it. You really can't. It's at the very top. It says blue. It's blue. Give living water. So it's a blue banner. It says give living water, and that's Food for the Poor. Any amount will be safe over there. Make your Lent meaningful. Help a child today. I also want to remind you, I'm in the Relief Factor studio. Took my Relief Factor on the air in hour number 1. I want to remind you that every person out there who's dealing with any kind of ache and pain that's minor, you haven't broken an arm, you don't need a hip replaced, but you just got minor aches and pains because you exercise too much. Out here in California, we have the Santa Anas. I'm leaving on Thursday back to the Beltway, and I'm going to miss Santa Ana Part 2, but a lot of people were out on the water this weekend. A lot of people were doing stuff they hadn't done all winter long, because it went to 90s in Southern California. And they'd rather walk a long way than pay the gas price out here, which is $5.50 a gallon right now, almost up to the Biden era of $6.50. Guess what? Relief Factor only costs $19.95 for a 3-week starter pack. That's less than $1 a day. You can call 1-800, the number 4, and the word relief, 1-800-4-RELIEF, or head to their website, find the starter pack at $19.95. Try it for 3 weeks to help your aching knees, back, joints, whatever, at relieffactor.com, relieffactor.com.